Hi, my name is Preston Cochran, and we're here at Tracehorse Studio in Nashville, Tennessee. In the previous video, you got to see how we led a professional tracking session using Luna. You also got to hear for yourself how the Unison preamps and the Apollo hardware compare to our analog preamps and our outboard gear. In this video, Scottie's going to show you how he mixed Carl's song using Luna, and he's going to show off some specific features Luna allows him to implement in his mix.
Most of my mixes are very simple. I just try to be musical. Today I'm going to show you some highlights from my mix that utilize some of the unique features of Luna, including some of the console summing and tape emulation. So the workflow in Luna is really cool because I'm capable of using all these UA plugins that are awesome, but I'm also able to load in some of my favorite plugins like, the Sound Toys stuff. Let's start with my drum bus. I'm using an API summing for the whole drum bus, which I really like summing with API stuff. If you send Neve stuff into an API, it's always a good combo in my opinion. And I'm also using a little bit of tape, a 456, 15 inches per second, pretty standard stuff. I track drums to tape fairly frequently, so 15 inches per second, that's the best speed for getting good drum sound, so I figured let's try that. It gives it kind of just like a little fatter, punchier, warmer sound. It saturates in a nice way. And then from there, I'm just using a G Bus, which is probably one of my most used compressors, especially in mixing. It's a really pretty sounding compressor. So let's take a listen to the drum bus soloed up with the plugins engaged and the plugins bypassed. So the tape compares to my experiences with actual tape machines, which is actually fairly extensive. For somebody my age, I've worked on tape quite a bit. It gives you a lot of the best parts of tape without having to deal with the noise floor, or you have the option of that if you want, rather, or aligning the machine before the session. It's as easy as changing the bias or something like that with just the click of a button, which is really cool. So we have our vocal and our vocal double, both of which I'm using this Precision de-esser, which is one of my most used UA plugins actually. If I'm using another de-esser and find I need to de-ess more, I'll use this de-esser because it actually has a lot more headroom than some de-essers do. And it actually has sort of a similar vibe to a hardware de-esser, which I think is really cool. Tuning. Really light tuning. Carl's a great singer. And then we're using the 175B, which I said previously is probably one of the best complementers ever made. So it's really hard to go wrong with this. It's really cool on vocals, especially if something that you want to have a little crispiness in the vocal. You don't want the cleanest compressor in the world. If you use this compressor, you're compressing. It's not going to be massively transparent. It can be if you want it to be, but generally speaking, this is not what you want to go for if you're doing that. I want it to be kind of a vibey vocal, so I'm using this. Furthering that, I'm using more harmonic distortion, which I find it's nice to add things like this. I'm also using this nice reflection engine, which I think is really cool. It gives the vocal a little bit more ambience or sound a little more lively, which I think is fun. I like to add the harmonic distortion to the vocal, and then obviously I'm EQing out the points that I don't like about it after the distortion's added. For the double, same chain up until here. We're adding a little bit of chorus, which it's sort of an 80s vibe on the track, and the chorus second vocal sounds cool. It's a little like Jeff Lynne-ish. Again, I'm gutting the low end. I am gutting it all the way up to 300 hertz, 315 hertz, which is one hell of a high pass filter. But it is cool when you're doubling something because you don't need two vocals with full low end. And again, I'm putting it through a micro shifter, which you don't want a lot of low end to go into your micro shift. So it kind of just comes out as being more of an effect. It's technically a different performance, but I'm using that different performance as almost like a slapback delay on the voice, if that makes any sense. And then we have a parallel vocal effects bus being fed by sends from the vocal and the double. Again, EMT 250, love it. Probably favorite reverb of all time. LA2A a little bit after it because I like to compress my reverbs just a touch, just to give them that feel. A couple of instances of EQ. So I'm EQing into the reverb because I don't want low end to go into the reverb.
I'll wait for you to come back into my loving arms. You know it's true. When you're blue, I'm the one you run to, baby. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is too late. But just in case.
All that stuff is just there to help the vocal sit back a little bit, because in this mix I was having a little bit of like, I could feel the vocal poking out too much, and I wanted it to feel blended in. Moving forward, we have a bus of all the harmonies that are happening during the choruses. This bus is being fed by the outputs of the harmony tracks. On this bus, I am using the Neve summing because that's what I'm comfortable with, and that's what I kind of would be doing anyway. And then I'm using the tape again. This is the kind of thing that I sort of felt like quarter-inch reels get used a lot, you know, obviously for mix downs and stuff like that, but it's also good to use them for effects, like whether it's slapback delay or if you're doing tape loops or stuff like that. Here we're just doing a little bit of EQ before going into all my effects, which is generally what I do. Ssl G Bus, again, I use it all the time. The UA version is probably my favorite of the plug-in versions of this unit. As somebody who uses a hardware one all the time, it's hard to find one that does exactly like the kind of thing that I get out of the hardware. The UA one does it. Here we have the Capital Chamber. I love this plugin. This might be my favorite plugin that I hadn't had a chance to necessarily use, but I was really excited to use. It had a nice decay that I thought was like really tying to what I'm trying to do. Going again, we have the ADA. This flanger's amazing. Just giving it a little wiggle, for lack of a better term. This is another EQ that I use all the time in hardware form, but this plugin sounds incredible. This is just a graphic equalizer. It's an API 560. It's a really easy, gentle plugin to use. And then a little bit of micro shift. All together, when it's all bust like this, you get kind of an interesting, fun, pop sort of vocal sound that really gives the track a nice little piece. The other thing that grounds the song, besides, you know, the other instruments that we've been talking about, is the acoustic guitar. I have an acoustic guitar on a track, I like it to be almost part of the percussion. So I'm sort of treating it the same way as I would treat percussion. I'm giving it a little bit of this tape saturation with the oxide. It was a little simpler because it's just one knob and a switch, which I think is really, really smart design, especially if you're just trying to do something simple. It's like, is this the vibe? Yes or no? Really easy to tell. For this, it was totally the vibe. Going into it, this is kind of a similar thing I do all the time, is I just kind of cut low end, and then I'm adding a little bit of harmonic distortion where I want it. This is an Ssl 4000 series channel strip. It's a plugin I use all the time. UA does an amazing job here of replicating it. This is really fun. You can change between black and brown equalizer style. Those are just different years of the hardware, but the plugin lets you do both, which is really fun. Filters are probably the most important aspect of this plugin, but I am using the dynamics a little bit. This compressor is really simple and really easy to use, but also effective, which I think makes it one of the most useful pieces that you can have. And then going forward, it's an API 560. This is just more catering the acoustic guitar to be part of the track. And our end result is this. My mix bus is UA plugin heavy. I'm using API summing. If I've tracked heavily on the Neve, I'll mix into the API. Those two things complement each other really well. So we're going from the API summing. Again, here's our tape. We're using 900, which is, you know, really high grade studio tape formula. I'm doing 30 IPS, which is fast tape speed. You know, it's going to sound really clean, low noise floor. Less of that low end bump thing that we're getting when we're doing with the drums, but it's going to do a nice thing to the top end and the mid range that I find really pleasing to the ear. Our inserts, we're going into the SSL. We're doing just a little bit of gain staging with the line amplifier. From there, we're going into the LA2A. LA2A is just doing, if something like drastic happens in the song, it might smooth it into the SSL, which I find is a really nice thing to do. The SSL, I try to just leave it on this speed. It feels really musical for most things, unless it was like a really fast track maybe. I would change the attack and release a little bit. But for most music, this is a really nice way to just sort of like gloss over it and kind of move with the bass. From there, this is the plugin I use always. I basically do this thing with the 4K on a Pultec. It's nothing earth-shatteringly new or groundbreaking, but you boost at 4K and you attenuate at 10K. And it does like a nice little thing where it adds a little bit of presence in the high end. These are just key EQ points that I EQ out of every mix I do for the most part. From there, I go into a little bit of widening, nothing crazy. And then this is where a lot of like the heavy lifting of what I'm actually doing. Like the other compressors in this line are doing minuscule stuff that's almost just gain staging. But this plugin I use all the time. This is the Precision Multiband, and it lets me problem solve and listen to just sections and bands. And I basically dial in each section to how the track's transients are moving within that frequency range. I'm also turning this into like a little bit of a smile curve. I'm boosting the super subby stuff and the high end ever so slightly. Nothing crazy. It's not like I'm like boosting it like, 10 dB or something like that. It's like minuscule amounts. From here, I have this limiter on right now, but if you look at it, it's just to bring it up to listening volume. So for my 2 bus, let's listen to that with the plugins engaged and with the plugins bypassed. I'm going to leave the limiter on, though, just for makeup gain, because it would be very quiet without it.
Come back into my loving arms. You know it's true. You're blue. I'm the one you run to, baby. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is too late. Just in case.
I am very happy with how my mix turned out mixing entirely in Luna. It felt similar, at least because I wasn't trying to go crazy with deep parameters or anything like that, to how I would mix on a console, which I've done a lot of in the past. One, you have the bussing and summing sounds and all that stuff, but also I'm just putting things in the insert, keeping it simple. I try to track with the plugins or the hardware that I want to be using, and then just kind of go from there. So this software was really great for that.
I'm the one you run to, baby. I'll wait for you to come back into my love.
Thanks for watching, and tune in for our next and final video in this series, where I'll show you how I master Carl's song in Luna using an Apollo Twin.
You.